So today I wanted to talk about custom CSS styling, in particular around this button here, which is the login button, and we have this text for returning user. Somebody can click on that and it's got some specific features. And so I wanted to go over how we're making that happen and how we make this change. And so the first thing I want to describe or show you is within the website, there is an option called design. And from that design, we can go to site styles. And here we can do things like set the text. Let's say if I click on here, it will select aspects that it thinks I'm pointing to, and then I can change the color. I can change all these things in the style of the website, headline sizes and all that. But there are times when we want to do some customization that goes beyond what we can do with the design tab. So within the design tab, we have a thing called custom CSS. If we click on there, we can add some custom CSS. Now, we do a fair amount of customization, but find it easier if you're doing a fair amount rather than just little stuff to actually include it as a CSS file. And when I say CSS, CSS is a styling file. There's HTML and CSS. And if I go to W3 Schools here, there's an intro to what CSS stands for: cascading style sheets, describes how elements should be styled. So it's separating the style from the content, and that's what CSS is. And in Squarespace, we can customize things that go beyond the site styles. The other important thing about CSS is that it is a rather verbose program. What some organizations have come up with has been what's called CSS preprocessors. And so what that is, so here's an example. This is CSS here, and it has a lot of indentation, so to speak. So if I'm calling out a particular element within the code, I can style it, I can color it, I can put the background color, I can do all these things. And then when I indent things, it's attaching it. But in regular CSS, now if I copy this and I paste this into a preprocessor, like this is called, so I paste it over here and then it preprocesses it, you can see how this advanced panels is repeated several times for different things. So that's the downside of CSS. It's always been this thing where you had to verbosely spell everything out. And over time, somebody figured out we can make it easier to code over in this way and then to spit it out in a way that the browser wants to see that content. That's a little background about preprocessing. Then there's two major ones, which is SAS, which was invented back in 2006, called syntactically awesome style sheets. And then there was another one that came out a little bit later called LESS, which is leaner style sheets. The difference between LESS and SAS is that LESS is run on the client server because it's JavaScript based, and so it's a lot easier to run. And the most beautiful thing, I love JavaScript, but Squarespace, but it's not necessarily published, but they use LESS. And so where I described where we can do preprocessing here is like we can write LESS, which is that preprocessing code in here, and it'll automatically interpret it in real time onto the site, which is really great. So you've got the preprocessor built in, and all other regular projects, you have to install that preprocessing. It's a lot of extra work, where Squarespace saves us a lot of time and makes it super simple to do that. You're not seeing any customization because where we put customization is back over into settings, advanced, code injection. So over here is where we have our custom. Now here's a couple of different files, but we have this style sheet and custom site live.css. Now we've coded it someplace else because it's a little easier when you're doing a lot of customization to kind of do it in this independent file and then call this file rather than doing it through the LESS editor in Squarespace. So it's just a lot easier to develop that and quicker in that way. But for small updates, we're going to use that design. And so the ask has been, can we change this returning to returning user? Now, let's just take a look at this for a second. So we've got this navigation, and then we've got this, and this is what we customize. We want to make this a button to make this the most important thing that somebody says. And then we wanted to add some content that kind of helped them understand what that button was. Now, this is nothing that you can really do in Squarespace natively, just by default. It doesn't really have these options, especially adding extra text to the navigation. And so let me walk you through that. So this is our top navigation here, and that's these links here. And then what I decided to do for this is I decided to put it in the secondary navigation. which is right here. But by putting it in the secondary navigation, we have some different styling abilities, but we can't do this button ability. But this is what I wanted to customize. And so if I do inspect from Chrome, I can see that I'm selected that. So this is here. And if I go up here, I can see that this is part of the secondary nav. So that's the first, and you can see how they're highlighting. Here's the code. So I put in that class for secondary navigation, and then I put in this. Now this is the header nav item. So if I look at here, I look at the class, I can see the class right there, header nav item. If we had multiple links in the secondary navigation, they would all be styled in this exact same way. But we figured we didn't, at this point, we only needed one button, so we're just going to, we would need to make some adjustments if we were adding more secondary navigation. That being said, this is there where we're putting in the background, color, and the radius of the button and all of that. And then we have the CSS rule called after. And that says after the button, we can do some other things. And that's where that text returning is. Okay, so that's where that's being set. And it's an interesting CSS concept that you can add text. So that kind of almost breaks the rules a little bit. It's not a styling thing, but it is a feature, and we're using it because it's actually an easier place to store this content than trying to figure out where in the navigation, where in the navigation do we put that and make it easy. And so the easier spot was just to put it in the CSS. Because that's installed and added as a file, this custom site live, we would have to download the file, make the change in the file, reprocess that file, and then reinstall that. And I think what we can do for these little updates is if I go to back to design, custom CSS, we're going to add that here. So if I go back to this code and I'm just going to paste this in like this. Paste that in. Now here it's throwing an error because it's looking for some variables, and that's something that Les gives us the ability to do, some other coding options. So it's giving us that error, but we don't care about that because what we're going to do is we're going to delete everything that we don't need and just focus on this one change. There, our error is gone, and what we want to do here is change this to user. If I hit save here and hit reload, all right, so it's not working. So the custom code that we've added is running after this. And so the one thing we can do to say, and that's what cascading means, it's like it's going to add, whatever the cascade is in effect. And so the cascading is, this is actually probably before, without checking, my assumption is this is before the custom code added. So I'm going to do this, which we can override that by using the word important. If I change that and hit save, and there we go. But we've got to do some centering options. So let's see if we can fix that. So what I want to do is I'm going to inspect this again, and here we are, and here's the after. And what I think we want to do in this case is we want to move that over. And so one of the things we can do that's kind of interesting, I'm going to show you how within the browser I can test some styling without committing to it. And so I'm going to try this margin -left. And again, you need to know a little bit of CSS, but CSS is probably one of the easiest languages to learn. And so I highly implore you to try this out. So we're going to go margin left, and we're going to say minus 15 pixels. And see how it's changing right there? Maybe we want 16 pixels. And we could even like size the font down. Let's say, what font size is this? This size is, if I go compute it, it's going to tell me font size is 12. Okay, so if I go back to styles here like we were doing, and I could even change the font size to, let's say 11 px to make that fit a little bit better. Let's try that over here. So we're going to say margin left minus 15 px. I don't think I'm going to need important minus. And like I said, I'm going to size that down just a hair so it fits a little bit better. Again, I try not to use important unless absolutely necessary. Hit save. Let's do a reload. I'll probably move that over a little bit more. I could have tested that better. Just eyeballing it today. But hey, easy to change, right? So there we go. From this perspective, what we can do in the future is that if we add a bunch of customizations, we can then, after a while, open up that file, add these back in, and make this, clear this out so everything is stored in that file. But I think for these quick edits, this is a good place to do those things. so that we're not, opening those other additional files and going through that long process to do that, so we can stage some things here and have these work in tandem. That's how we do some customization using CSS, Less, and Squarespace.